Let me just figure out how to share my screen. We'll get started any second now. One, this one. I'm gonna present it. This is normally very easy, and I have to do it. I don't know what I'm doing. Slide. I'm gonna wait a minute or so just to see if I have some of my other fellow BCBAs joining me, and then we'll get started. Oh, guys, let's see what. It looks like they may not have gotten the invite, so I'm going to see if I can invite them real quick. Maybe. Jenna.
Hello.
Link to Marissa as well. I'll give her another minute. And then we'll get started.
Thanks for doing this twice. I know that it's less than ideal.
Not a problem. We'll kind of go through it a little differently. Unfortunately, Meg couldn't join us this morning. She had something else come up, which happens in her life. That's fine. Do you know if there's a way to like split screen share this? Nope, that's not the button I wanted.
I think on Zoom, there's a way there's one that you can just share like what you're looking at on your screen, no matter like what you change or exit out of or whatever. So then if like you had a split screen, it would show it that way, but I don't really know. I haven't used Zoom in a while.
I don't either. We will figure it out.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, because if I escape out of the screen right now, nope. You see this, right? You see
Yeah.
the outline.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I thought I saw Marissa join us.
I see her.
Yes,
Okay,
hi.
cool. Okay, I can't see you, so I was just making
Oh,
sure that
That's
you
okay.
actually
Hi.
got on. I'm not awesome with Zoom, so I don't know how to work this all the time. Okay, we are going to go through this. You guys ready? And you guys are more than welcome to jump in if you have questions or comments, because I know you guys have also been a part of IEPs, so your input is awesome. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today. We're ABA Across Environments. My name is Cassie Farrell. I'm joined by my other BCBAs, Marissa and Jenna. And I really wanted to talk about this topic because when I was a brand new BCBA, these things were super daunting to me. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was really prepared when I headed into my first meeting. And that isn't the feeling that I really want people to have when they head into meetings, especially when BCBAs are supposed to be more of a supportive element to our families. And I'm hoping that with this meeting that we can kind of change that mindset so that we're not going in to these feeling confused or unprepared, and we have a much more collaborative meeting and less combative meetings, which are also something that people tend to experience. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to kind of go through some parent concerns and involvement. I want to kind of break down what the IEP meeting agenda looks like. That is often a question I have from parents when we get started. I want to go through what the BCBA role will typically look like within an IEP meeting, how we can best collaborate, and then maybe some questions at the end. When I first started as a BCBA, I didn't really have any experience. Fortunately, I've known Meg since I started in the field of ABA, so I didn't have to go by myself. I was super well supported. But that's not often the experience that we always have. And I want to make sure that we have our parents and learners feeling like they're supported in these IEP meetings. So whether this is their first meeting or it's their seventh meeting, whatever the case may be, I really go through these steps with them every single time just so that we can review what everything's going to look like before we step into that meeting. We'll start with parent concerns and the parent perspectives, which is really the best point to start with. If you have that chance to step aside and talk with the parents ahead of time. I get so many questions. And so it's almost like you can see fear on their face about heading into those meetings just because nobody really tells you what they're going to expect. You are having a lot of people there. It's really about your child's success. So they're very invested, but they also really want to feel very prepared. So I want to provide as much support to those families and those learners as possible to increase that success for their independence in school and outside of school. This creates also an opportunity for the BCBAs to provide a therapeutic relationship from the start to let them know, like, I'm here for you. I'm not here to support the school's agenda. I'm here to support you and what you're wanting from your child at the school. Research that I did on parent perspectives has been a little varied. Um, in a research article by Fish, a bunch of families were interviewed on their perspectives during the IP meeting. And some families reported that they felt that their input was really valued and they were treated with respect and they had an overall positive experience, which is awesome. And that's the goal. That's what we want to see from these IEP meetings. On the other hand, we also had some families that reported more of a negative experience in that they felt that they were treated badly by the schools. They felt that some schools blamed them for their child's behavior and their poor academic performance, or that the parents were being unreasonable with their expectations for their child, which is absolutely not something that we want our families to feel going into those meetings. That's why we're there to support those families so that we can step in and intervene and advocate for what they're needing. Another study that I came across by Stoner et al., parents with children with ASD at IEP meetings described their initial IEP meeting as confusing, with specific feelings of feeling totally lost and being around a bunch of people that seemed like they understood more than they did. And that's also not something that I want my families to be feeling when we're there. That's You want to leave an IEP meeting feeling like, okay, I feel confident that my child's going to be supported in this setting and that I am thoroughly invested in what they're going to be doing because I feel confident in how they've explained it to me and what's going to be happening. I don't know about you guys, but if I feel really lost and confused, I don't typically speak up for myself. I get pretty quiet and just kind of let people talk to me. And I'm guessing that some of our parents probably feel very similarly in that same circumstance. Um, I don't feel comfortable to really speak up, and that's something that I really want our parents to feel like they can do in our meetings, especially when it's regarding their lives. So as BCBAs, we really want to help shift that perspective away from feeling lost and overwhelmed to really feeling empowered and confident in those meetings. So before we can really foster that parent involvement and really answer their concerns, I want to kind of dive more into what this IEP process looks like. So the IEP does go through a few different phases, and it really depends on where you're starting. The first step for IEPs is the referral and the consent. With that, we will submit a referral. Well, they will get a referral to the school and they'll follow with a consent form. This is something that can be done through the school. So after you get started, schools might reach out and say, hey, we feel like this is something that we can do. Let's kind of get started with this. Or we can get it ahead of time, which is really the goal. So that way we can get those supports started as soon as possible and get that in before they start either preschool or kindergarten or whatever age that they're going to start going into school. With that, they'll go into an evaluation. An evaluation will be based on their suspected disability. So if you go in referencing that they might have autism or they do have a referral for autism or developmental delay, whatever the case may be, that's what they're going to target in that evaluation. They're going to see what kind of supports that child would need and determine their eligibility based on that disability. Now, during the evaluations, They're going to have lots of people there. I always like to let parents know that ahead of time. They're not as overwhelmed heading into that situation. A lot of times there's going to be an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a physical therapist, a school counselor, all the people that possibly could be present are possibly going to be present. And they're going to help determine that evaluation. If at this point in time an evaluation comes back that you disagree with, there are certain things that you can advocate for. One of those things is called an IEE. And that is when you do not agree with what's happened or the school or how they've evaluated your child, either based on you don't agree with the disability that they chose, you don't agree with the outcome of the disability, and you can advocate for a reevaluation essentially. And the school will do this at the school's expense, and they will hire an outside person to come and reevaluate. It can become kind of tricky in that circumstance. You may have to consult additional legal advice if the school does not want to do that and says that they did a good enough job. But knowing that you have that option is really, really important, because a lot of times you can just be dismissed and moved on. And I want families to understand they do have alternative options, that they don't just have to be told what their child is from a 30-minute to an hour evaluation, which isn't always accurate. In the IEP meeting, which will come next after that evaluation, and the first two steps are really that beginning phase. So after you've kind of established that you have an IEP, you don't typically have to go through those again. I have seen it where they get reevaluated based on either a regression of their needs or based on progress of their needs, and they'll reevaluate at that point. But once you have the IEP meeting or IEPs established, you typically don't have to go back through those initial phases. With the IEP, that's where we'll kind of go through the evaluation. They'll talk about what they saw, and each individual person will go through their expertise level, which I honestly really prefer to hear, because I like to hear that different perspectives. I think that's really important for us as BCBAs to be cognizant of, because I don't have all the information about occupational therapy. I don't know all the speech things that could benefit my learner. So it's really imperative that we do listen to those critiques and observations that they saw, so that can support our development of our treatment plans and our interventions as well. But they'll go through what they saw and how they feel that they can best support the child. They'll determine eligibility based on that suspected disability. So they'll have like a list of questions, and it's usually, can this learner meet goals without any intervention support? Typically, you would like that answer to be no, because that's why we're here. We're getting the IEP meeting. And we want them to have that. We want that answer to be yes, but sometimes we all need support. It's fine. And I like to let families know that too. It doesn't necessarily mean anything negative for their child. We're just helping support their learning style. They'll also answer another question of like, is this due to this disability? Yes. So once we answer those eligibility questions, we can then go on to placement and the intervention plan. And that's where they'll kind of break down those goals again per discipline of what their plans are to achieve success for that child. So it might be like 30 minutes of speech a month or something like that, that they'll take them out of class. Sometimes they can keep them in class, and making sure that they're very specifically outlined so that you have that understanding ahead of time before you leave that meeting. So if they tell you that they're going to help your child with speech, ask them how. Make it very, very outlined for yourself so that you know what's expected. And then they'll set up goals that you'll meet with them on how their progress is going. During this meeting, we want to make sure that parents approve of this. Again, as I stated earlier, if you do not approve of what's happening, please speak up for yourself, speak up for your families, have the parents do so. It is okay to say, no, I do not agree with what you guys are saying. I don't think this is the best intervention for my child. Fortunately, the IEP meetings that I have attended, the team is pretty responsive. We want to collaborate again instead of be combative, um, so that they will modify what it looks like within reason. They'll have certain expectations that they can allow and what we can submit to insurance, but that is our goal, to support that learner. And if it parents are like, actually, that never works at home, I don't think that's going to work here. Parents have the right to say that and refuse the treatment if they're trying to do something they adamantly don't want happening. However, if the parents agree with everything that's happening, they get that approval, implementation can start immediately after that meeting. So they can start getting those supports, they can start getting those pull-out services, they can start getting those accommodations for testing, for their environmental success, whatever the IEP meeting established. And then from there, they'll have progress reports and an annual review. So you will get copies from the school district about how things are going, and it's usually quarterly. But you can talk about how often you would like to see reports. You can also advocate to get email responses. I've had parents get like weekly reports, daily reports, or quarterly reports. It's really dependent on what you're wanting and what you can advocate for. I typically see more of a quarterly response from that. And that's really good for parents to see so they can keep up with what they're doing. And then also try to utilize some of those same strategies in their home environment. So they're continuing that success and they're not only seeing this progress at school, we're also seeing it throughout their outside school life. And then the annual review will come back and they'll basically redo the IEP initial meeting. Well, they'll go through the same assessments of like, here's how we're doing. We still feel like this eligibility meets the requirements. We still feel like the placement is good. Here's how they progressed. Here's the modifications we're going to make. And here's how this next school year is going to look for them. And that's pretty typically about how the IEP process looks. From there, after I've kind of given them a really good outline of what they want, I have a pretty basic list of questions that I get from parents. And this is more from a novice perspective of the first IEP meeting more than it is an advanced IEP attender. But a lot of questions I get, like, what is an IEP meeting? What should I be expecting? Who goes to an IEP meeting? Can I bring someone? Should I bring someone? What should I bring to my IEP meeting? Do I participate in this? And what happens next? That is such a really good question. And I think it's often one that is overlooked in a lot of IEP meetings. What happens next? Because you get thrown all of this information and then you leave there and hopefully you're feeling really confident about it. But it's also, I would like follow up. A lot of us prefer that. Even if I just attended a seminar or a CEU of my own, I want to follow up with this information so that I feel like I'm really confident in what I learned. So those are the starting questions that I typically try to answer for those parents. I did kind of just review what the IEP meeting is, so we're going to kind of skip over that question. But I do like to go over what they can expect from an IEP. And that's where I do kind of break it down into like, okay, we're going to expect a lot of people present at this meeting. And I will break it down, especially if they don't understand what an occupational therapist typically deals with, why the school counselor would be there, why the principal is there. So they can understand that these people are all there really to support their child's learning and their child's success. Like I said earlier, it's really valid to have all those people present because we all want to collaborate together with this. and bring all of our different experiences and knowledge and perspectives into it together, because that typically supports their development so much better when we're all talking together. I don't have all that knowledge, nor am I going to learn all that knowledge and continue with all that education that would be required from all of those disciplines. It would be a lot. And then most of the meetings are typically scheduled for about an hour. I let them kind of know that time frame, that they should expect it to be about that length. Sometimes I do have IEP meetings extend beyond that, and that's okay if that happens. I'd rather have my parents advocate and speak up and ask questions during those meetings than wait until afterward, because once it's finalized, it's kind of a little bit more difficult to set up a meeting after that and kind of go through what modifications you didn't want or things that you felt would be better. Not to say that it can't happen. It's just better to try to get that in during that initial IEP meeting. And then I let them know that I'm more than happy to be there with them. So goes along with that next question. Who goes to an IEP meeting? Should I bring someone? Yes, if you feel that you want to bring someone, please do so. It does not have to be your BCBA. We are absolutely happy to attend with you guys. But if that's not who you want to bring, if you'd rather bring somebody else that you feel better supported with, please do so. I've had several of my meetings come with their outside speech pathologists, their outside occupational therapists, in addition to me, in addition to their spouse or their, additional caregiver that's really prevalent in their lives. Bring the people that you're going to feel supported by, because again, at the end of the day, you're there, or the parents are there for their child, and we're there for their success. And I keep bringing it back to that point, but that's what matters the most for this meeting, is how we're going to best support their development and getting their as close to their independence as possible. Another good question, what should I bring to my IEP meeting? I think that the best way to go within those IEP meetings is to bring a copy of that report. You can advocate for that ahead of time. Normally, I see families get it about a week tops in advance to maybe 2 to 3 days in advance. So it doesn't give us a whole lot of time to really prepare, but any preparation is always better than no preparation. It does give you that time to review what goals they have listed, what things that they observed, and how you can have questions or comments about what you see in that. Know that this request of the copy is that it's a copy. It's not a final draft. It is illegal to have a final draft in place before parents have attended the meeting, before they have finalized. We have to have approval before a final draft can be submitted. So making sure parents know that too. Like, I don't like that they said that about my child. Awesome. Let's make a note of it. We'll comment on it. It's not a finalized draft. We're good. Any additional reports you have. So BCBAs often have treatment plans. We have progress reports. We have graphs, hopefully, because we're awesome. And we have tons of documentation about what we're doing to support our learners, like our BIPs. Those are awesome things for them to bring to the meeting. If they're not bringing them, I tend to bring a copy just in case, so that I have some references of like, here's what we're doing, here's what I've modified, here's what was not successful. That's beneficial for us in our meeting and the meeting, to support their intervention process. If they have other disciplines, bring that into the meeting. If they have additional documentation or referrals or any evidence to support why school was not beneficial before an IEP meeting was established, why they couldn't meet goals before an IEP meeting was established, any regression that was seen without any supports. Those are really, really good evidence if you have that, to support why certain interventions can be in place compared to others. It's hurts my heart a little bit sometimes when I see, do I participate in the meeting? Because yes, you should participate in the meeting. You should be able to ask questions and stop them. And I know that a lot of times schools really do try to push through it because they have an agenda. They want to get through it as quickly as possible, move on to their next IEP meeting, whatever the case may be. But please participate, ask questions, make comments, make sure that you feel confident in what's going on so that you leave that meeting feeling much more supported than you do feeling defeated. And then what happens after that meeting? I did kind of go through that in our initial, like what that process looks like. We will get progress reports, but make sure that you're following up with your families as a BCBA. Do you have any additional questions? Do you not understand anything that was said? Because despite me telling families to advocate and speak up in those meetings, sometimes I still get stepped outside and be like, hey, I didn't understand what they said when they said this. Like, awesome. Let's go through it together. And that's totally fine. I'm definitely a culprit of doing very similar things when I'm in like meetings that I don't understand, like insurance meetings. I'm like, I don't understand. Please explain this to me. Like I'm a 5-year-old, you know? And that's okay. Please follow up with your families afterwards to make sure that they understand everything that was said, because a lot of times we do also use jargon that parents are not familiar with, and we need to break that down. I've had several families reach over to me and say, hey, what does this mean? I don't understand. And I'll break it down. Okay. For families, we want to try to create a plan. And this is again, if you have that time and opportunity to sit with them before we head into that meeting. But as I discussed earlier, we want to prepare as much as possible. Request the IEP documentation ahead of time. Review their rights and benefits that they have access to ahead of time. I have been to several IEP meetings where I get there, they hand them a copy and say, here, this is for you to review. It's like a thick packet of all of their rights, and no one has time to actually review that in the meeting, nor do parents really care about that information at the meeting right then and there. Like, yes, they do care, but they're also more interested in what you guys are going to be saying. So if you have the time to talk through that ahead of time and review that ahead of time, please do so that they have the rights in their forefront so that they can know, oh, I don't have to agree to everything you're saying. So that's great to know. Oh, if I disagree with this, I have the right to say I want an IEE. Awesome. These are things that parents should know ahead of time. And oftentimes it's just really brushed off because schools expect parents to already know this information, which isn't fair and true oftentimes. Determine questions, especially if you have that IEP documentation. I try to sit with my families ahead of time and go through it. Do you have questions about any of the language and what they're talking about? Do you have questions about why they're only receiving this amount of time per month? Do you have questions about why this goal is in place? Especially, I have a lot of parents that'll want to go in and be like, I want my kid to be able to socialize and participate the whole time during school. Why is a target like that they're going to sit for 10 seconds? That doesn't mean what I want them to be doing. Yes, let's talk about it. Let's break that down. We need to understand that progress does take time. So that might be why their goal is a little bit smaller so that we can build on it as they get through the school year. But that's a great question to ask because I don't have the answer. I can tell you what I think the answer might be, especially because it's not a plan I developed. But let's ask that question. What concerns do you have? Like I mentioned earlier, if you feel like they're using an intervention of more of a punishment-based procedure, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want that to be happening with my child. I don't want them to be excluded from activities when they act out. Or if, oops, I didn't realize it moved on. Or if you feel like they're doing a reinforcement strategy that you've tried at home and you have supporting evidence of this has not worked for my child, write that down. Say that. Or if you see things like recommend, or if you see things in the intervention plan and have recommendations, they're the parent. You know your child best. Make those recommendations. I have done this in home. It's worked really well. Or I've noticed that they tend to do better when they have female support over male support. Those are awesome recommendations for parents to tell the team because that helps us make a more cohesive, collaborative IEP meeting for them. If you have attended any of our CEUs in the past, you know that we're really big fans of ACT. We use it pretty consistently in all of our interventions. And this is something that I try to go through with families before we head into there. As much as I want this IEP meeting to go smoothly and perfect and everything comes out exactly the way we want it to, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be something that's thrown at me that I wasn't expecting, or there's going to be, it's going to come out differently than I initially thought it's going to. And with that, we need to practice through ACT so that we can kind of regulate ourselves through this meeting and get through everything that we want to get through without getting too heated or feeling upset about things that we're reading. One of the easiest places that I start with families with this is talking about their values. I've mentioned 100 times already. Their values are their child and their child's success. That's what they value the most. So reiterating that with them throughout the meeting. Okay, I understand that, you may be upset that you heard in the evaluation, he hit another child. I can understand that's upsetting, providing that empathy. Like, I get it. That's not fun to hear. But we are all here right now because we saw that in that, and we don't want to see it anymore. So here's how we're going to move forward with this. Practicing some diffusion strategies of like taking a deep breath. I also tend to model that in our meetings. Like if I hear something that I'm not overly familiar with, or if I hear something that I'm not really on board with, I'm going to take a deep breath in that moment, let it go, and ask questions. That is my committed action from there. If you hear something that you don't feel great about, let's ask a question. We already did committed actions by trying to get those questions, concerns, or recommendations ahead of time. We prepared for this. And then we can do some present moment stuff of reach out for your spouse's hand, look at me if you feel like you need that additional support in the moment. Bring your favorite pen to take notes with you, easy little things that you can help yourself or the parents in those moments get through this IEP meeting, reminding them to go back to that value of I'm here because I'm going to support my child. I'm going to advocate for my child. And at the end of this, I don't want to feel too heated to where the family tells me that I'm being irrational or that it's my fault this is happening, right? We don't want to hear that. So let's ground ourselves in those values. And then advocate. I like to really break down this advocate into multiple categories. One, obviously, we're there for the learner, advocate for that learner and what they need. If they're recommending things that don't make sense to you, please speak up. It's now's the time to speak up so that we can get that started ahead of time so that we're not going back and fighting with the school later. Like I told, or we've been doing this and you've been doing this, and now we're having our conflicting strategies that aren't supporting that learner. Advocate for your parents. A lot of times, like I said, that meeting is scheduled for an hour. They want to get it done in an hour or less. So they're going to go through, okay, here's what we saw. Here's what I saw. Here's what I saw. And they don't often allow for breaks. I will stop the meeting or like, I'm sorry, can we stop for a second? Hey, do you guys feel like everything so far has made sense? Do you guys have questions on anything that has happened? Advocate for the parents. I also will do my best observational skills as a BCBA to look at my parents and see their facial expressions. If they're starting to get more wide-eyed, I can see their shoulders are tensing. They might be really stressed. They might not feel confident on what's going on. Like, hey, actually, do you need to slow down for a minute? Should we take like a quick second for you just to process the information? We can stop for a second if you need to. That is our job as a BCBA too, to notice those things, to advocate for our parents and let them know that we are there for them. And then also advocating for yourself. I want to make sure that we're seen as a supportive element to that IEP meeting. I want to make sure that we leave that meeting feeling like we were valued and not like we're dismissed. So advocate for yourself. And sometimes it's not super fun. I don't always feel the most confident when I'm in there, especially when I'm surrounded by a bunch of people that have been like, I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm like, delightful. I've been doing this for like 6. But that doesn't diminish your experience. That does not diminish your input. Please advocate for yourself in a way that is collaborative. So you're not going to tell another BCBA at the meeting, if there is one, actually, I don't think you understand what we're talking about. It's not going to be a super respectful sign. We're not probably going to be overly supported in that environment. The school is probably going to support their BCBA over ours. So just make sure that as we're sharing things, it's like, I really love that recommendation. Here's something that we've noticed that maybe could support what you guys are planning on doing. Or, I have had research in this topic. I would love to sit down with you and talk about how we can better present this idea. Make sure that you're using words that are collaborative instead of combative. The BCBA role. I do like to let parents know going into this that they're the key players on this IEP team. I am there to support them. And it's not their job to know everything, but it's their job to best support their learners. And that's what we're there to do, is support them as much as we can. The easiest thing that we can do in those meetings, and what we're probably best at, is taking data. We need to take notes. I always ask for a copy of the IEP plan so I can take notes on the side of what they're doing, what assessments they use, what interventions they plan on doing, what reinforcement strategies, what consequence strategies are they going to be using? Because I don't want to apply something in the center setting or the home setting or in the community setting that they're not using. Or if we are doing something very contradictory to what's being in place at school, that is not going to support the generalization of that learner. So I am taking notes the whole time to support my learner and develop their skills as quickly as possible. I also like to make note of what goals have been met. If that's another, like if it's a continuation meeting, like, oh, we have met this goal and this is how we've met this goal. Awesome. Let me take note of that. Is this a continuing goal? Why has progress not being met? Great. I want to take notes of that too. And what new goals they have in place. I want to clarify too that just because these goals are in place at school does not mean they have to be goals for your intervention plan. It's good to know, it's good to support, it's good to be collaborative so that we're all working toward the same goal of developing the success of the child. And I'm not sure how insurance works for everyone across the country, but Medicaid and many insurances for us, if I place an academic goal, it's going to get rejected. So being mindful of the goals that they're talking about doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be goals that are placed in your treatment plan. With that being said, there are different ways that we can support those goals though, right? So it's like they want to make sure that, Johnny can meet 50 math questions in an hour, which feels like a lot as I say it, but we're not going to be able to target that. Math is a very academically based goal, but we can work on tolerance of sitting and attending. We can work on tolerance of holding a pencil. We can work on different skills that still meet that same objective of getting them to meet this requirement within our scope of practice. So making sure that we're staying within our scope, but also still supporting those goals. as a BCBA, I then also really want to make sure that I provide any additional information that I can based on things that I've seen. Like I said in the very beginning, I bring my copy of my behavior intervention plan. So we have that to collaborate on. Here's what we've done so far. Here's how this has been effective. And I want to make sure that we're continuing that communication. So if it needs to happen in this meeting, a lot of times schools will have the confidentiality agreement form so that we can start collaborating immediately. I'll give them my card if we don't have that. I try to get their special education teacher, the general education teacher, anybody's information at that point in time that might be beneficial for my learner so that I can start collaborating ahead of time. I have had so much success from this, and it really does shape the learner's development so much better if I have that collaboration with teachers. I've gotten so many reports and emails of like, hey, I just want you to know we switched to this new subject in school that might be affecting behavior at home. Or, hey, I just want you to know we saw this behavior today. You might see this later in your day. It is so beneficial. And then I can relay to them, hey, this is what my learner's been doing. Here's the progress. Or, hey, I know in my initial behavior plan, here's what I stated based on observations and based on new development. Here's kind of how I modified it. I'm not sure if you guys can apply the same circumstances, but that collaboration is always, always better. We also just started offering skills training to anybody that might need it. So if they want that additional training to be supported, we're offering that. We're not pushing it because, again, I want to be respected by the school. I want to be seen as a collaborative partner from the school, not that I'm better than they are. And what I know is better than what they know. So really making sure that you're using that language to describe how we're working together to support this development. We talked about how we're going to record that data. We're going to take notes. We talked about how we're going to advocate for a learner and talk about that. And then actively listening. I have mentioned that too, where we want to hear out everybody else's perspectives. I want to know that, oh my goodness, my learner has just started learning talking or how to talk. And I might want to slow my progress down because this is just a recently developed skill. I might want to break down my goals even smaller. Or my goodness, my learner just learned how to swallow. Maybe eating is or like working on tolerance with utensils or sitting and eating might not be as effective if they just learned this new skill, or it might be more effective. It's good to hear out those ideas and actively listen in that conversation, not shut down what we're hearing. Because I have worked with some BCBAs that tend to like, no, actually, here's what you should be doing. No. I have evidence to support this, which we do, which is awesome. Evidence is amazing. But I still want to hear it out. Maybe they have been trying something and it's been effective. Okay, cool. Good to know. Let me see if I can replicate this in a way that is evidence based in my scope of practice. I would like to hear all of those ideas. With collaboration, I try to advocate, obviously, to be in the school setting. Um, It's not often that I've been able to be present in the school setting. It's still my first go-to, though. It's best to be able to support in the area that they're learning in. And if we can do that, I'm going to try to do that. If I can't get in to support as their BT or their BCBA in that school setting, I'm going to try to do the next best thing and do an observation. So I'm going to advocate for myself to come in. Can I just watch? I just want to see what's going on in his day. I want to know how many kids there are, if he has specific reaction to certain settings, to certain contexts. I want to see it. Because hearing it from your perspective is great. It's one strategy. Seeing it for myself is going to be a whole different scenario. And I would love to see those observations of how my child is doing in the school setting. And then I want to get the specifics on the data. Oftentimes I'll hear in IEP meetings or from teachers their progress reports. Oh, Johnny's been doing so much better. Neat. What's that mean? What does better mean? Does that mean, we targeted the goal that he should be doing 50 math questions in an hour and he's actually at like 45. Awesome, you're right, he is doing really good. I want to know that specific data. But if he's at 10 compared to the 50 that you wanted him at, but he started at 0, that's still information I want to know. I want to know exactly where he is. Do you have a graph? Do you have any data specifically to support how much better Johnny's been doing? Goal setting, we want to make sure it's value-based. I did discuss that earlier of how we want to make sure it's benefiting the learner, but making sure that we're making the goals something that the learner is going to benefit from, that the family feels is valid for them to be learning. I literally just had another family report to me that they're working on flashcards with this kiddo, and the mom was like, that's not relevant for me for him to know right now. It's hard for him to even be in a classroom with his peers working on his flashcards is not that important to me. So making sure those goals that are set are value based and advocating for those goals to be value based. And then, as I've discussed several times, we want to make sure that we're generalizing their development. So, talking about the BIP, getting a requested copy of their BIP, sharing yours, sharing continual information. That is how generalization grows. That's how consistency happens. And making sure the families also know about this. I also just attended another meeting where parents asked, oh, should I be following these strategies at home? And the IEP team said it wasn't that relevant. And that's where I was able to advocate and say, I would love to have a copy of that so that I can make sure that we're doing the same thing. And then I would love to have our parents learn the same expectations so that learner knows no matter what context they're in, they have to follow through or they have to have the same contingencies in place. Otherwise, we're going to see parents are likely going to see or behaviors at home that you guys aren't seeing in the school. So I would rather us work together as a team. I was able to step in and say, I really think this would be better for our team. Let's do this. And that was a little bit more of a hard line for me that I had to draw, but it was also in a way that I felt was actually reciprocated because now we do have that continual talk. We've had that BCBA observe our sessions. Our BCBA went and observed at school. So we have that collaboration and we have that consistency. And that parent does feel like we're a little bit more involved and we are collaborating better than we were when we started the IEP. So it's very, very important that we're doing that. I just really like this quote. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. Our CEO, Meg, constantly tells us that we should be doing CEUs and research and articles. And because it does make that much of a difference, what I learned in grad school compared to what I know now, I would really be sad to look at myself from what I just know in grad school. It wouldn't be great. I wouldn't have learned. And like the benefits I've gotten from collaborating with speech and OT and PT in school districts and other BCBAs has been phenomenal in supporting my development. So this is why we want to collaborate. We want to make sure we're working together to share those experiences, develop our knowledge, and do better for our learners. This is a recording, so I'm guessing people don't have questions right now. But if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to reach out. I have my email here. You can reach out to any of us. You just replace my first name with Jenna, Marissa, Tommy, or Meg. We're all happy to help out and answer any questions that you guys have. Thanks for coming to our meeting today, guys. Yay. I don't know how to make it stop recording.
Oh
Okay.
man, I don't know. But thank you.
Yeah.